started with introduction then. I'll go first. So my name is Shanna. I am, I guess you could call the comms person, but I basically just do the social media here. I met Liz at the London E-Prix, the Formula E, and now I'm stuck with her and we're doing racing roles. And yeah, so this is our first interview and we're really looking forward to it. I am very much looking to, stick around in UK right now, but I actually am from Australia. But we'll see what happens. And then we have Christian.
Yeah, I'm Christian. I was actually, I don't know why I say this every time I introduce myself, but I was born in the same city Liz was born in, but we did know each other and we don't have any friends in common, even though it's a pretty small city. And we just met at uni last year. And yeah, we both study automotive engineering in Turin. So yeah.
And you know me, I'm Liz. I had a terrible idea of starting racing roles when I should be studying instead. And yeah, I mean, obviously you're part of the story of how we came to be. So it's really meaningful to actually have you here doing this with us.
I don't know what to say to that, really. I mean, I think what you're doing is great. I think I've said that before. It's people need to see all the roles. I think that's one of the biggest problems, especially that I've experienced through motorsport, is I don't want to say lesser people, but the people with I don't know, media and stuff like that is highly covered. And then even you have female cleaners and female in the factory serving food or making coffee, and there's even a post guy at Red Bull, and there's all those little jobs that you wouldn't have teams at all. So I think, and I think I've said it probably very many times, that Red Bull were very good at instilling that in us, that you couldn't do your jobs without everybody in that factory. So I think what you guys are doing and covering all the roles is a fantastic idea, which is obviously why you're steaming ahead with all your followers and stuff. So I think it's great.
Thank you. Can you tell a little bit about what kind of roles you've had, the series you worked in, and your sort of experience with that?
So you want to go straight in? Okay, so my first job was at Red Bull as a model maker. Actually, I started as a junior model maker. I wouldn't say it was something easy to get into at all. Let's be clear about that. It took me quite a while, and it took a long time before I actually heard back from them after the interview. So I started as a junior because I was quite new out of university. I think the misconception is that if you have a degree that you can go straight in high up, and there's some roles you can, I know in the police and the army and stuff like that, it's an advantage, but actually I think you struggle just as much with a degree these days. It's a benefit, you have a better understanding, and I would not have changed it for the world. It definitely helped me get to where I am. But obviously I went straight in. I went in as a junior. So the wage was okay. I think for my first job, or for anyone's first job, it was not a bad wage. And I think the experience was great. I loved it there. I had no problems there at all. I think the only problem is that once you're a junior, even when you're not anymore, you're always going to be the junior. You're always the young one, even though I wasn't, and it just sticks with you. So I left to pursue full-time racing, where I joined Williams as a composites technician. So I sort of did everything I needed to do as a model maker. There's more and more rapid prototyping, so you need, I would say, less and less skills. And I was quite fortunate to join when it's still quite a skillful job. Not that it's not skillful now, but it's a different skill now. And I was fortunate enough to learn a lot about composites and carbon fibre and things like that. So I thought I'd pursue that. So I went full-time racing at Williams F1 as their composites technician and did a season with them before going into WEC, where I was also a composites technician, but for endurance racing, where I started out at Jota, and then I was fortunate enough to work at Toyota. And, you know, it's gone from there, really. And then I sort of went back last year to Alfa Romeo to be a composites technician in F1. And then, yeah, went back to WEC this year, but unfortunately things didn't work out. So now we're going to see where that goes. But that's how it is. That's the nature of most jobs, actually. And I've been surprised to say that it's not unusual that things don't work out. And okay, it hit me quite hard because I've never experienced that in the 15 years of doing what I'm doing, but these things happen, and I'm sure it's happened for a reason, and we'll see what goes next.
How did you find that transition from going to from model maker to composites technician? Was it like a fairly smooth thing, or did you have to, you know, learn new skills like between changing jobs, or did you sort of arrive and it worked out?
Well, I think I was lucky, like I say, that when I started model making, we did a bit of everything. So we did some pattern making, and we did lots of composites in terms of laminating and trim shop, and, you know, a bit of everything. So I even did metal work at some points in my career when I was a model maker. So I guess it's a bit like being, what do they say, a master of all trades? No.
A jack of all trades.
It's a master of nothing. But I think you get an idea. And I think model making is a really good way to learn that, because you don't just learn, you learn about glue, and you learn about carbon and rapid prototyping now, and how to finish stuff and how to paint, and, you know, it's quite broad. I mean, I can't say what it's like right now, but obviously when I was there, it was it was great for learning everything. So I kind of learned my way into composites in that way, because we were almost given free rein to do some laminating. You know, it wasn't as strict as a general laminator. We weren't given strict rules, because we were making 60% parts, and we had a bit of freedom to use our knowledge of what we'd learned to make something structural, or, you know, and I think because it was a model, you had a bit more freedom to make mistakes, let's say. So, and it interested me, and I think carbon fiber, it's always going to be around. I mean, we're just developing it more and more now, and there's new techniques and slightly different types of composites materials, but I think from a longevity point of view for my career, it was something I thought would be a good transition.
Are you able to just go in and explain what those roles are, what they are in a nutshell, just for anyone who might be wanting to look into a new job, say model making or composites?
So model making in motorsport, you are responsible for 60%, generally it's a 60% scale model of the car, and you basically make modular parts for the car, and that can be anything from, well, anything you see on that car is modular. So the full size car is still modular, but less so. There's less components on the full size car because you don't need to have them. So you have a basic, what we would call a spine, like you have in your body, like a skeletal system of metal that you then bolt parts to, which are generally all working parts. Some models are hydraulic, so when they're in the wind tunnel, so that's predominantly what you're making the car for, is the wind tunnel, for wind tunnel testing. And as a model maker, you create all the parts, and you're responsible for the creation of those parts, whether it's a rapid prototyping, so sanding that down to get the correct surface finish for aero effects, or whether that's making a carbon part, or whether that's putting bearings in suspension. It's quite involved. You also then, some teams have model makers that are just factory based, so you're the ones preparing the parts, and then they have separate tunnel model makers, which are the ones that fit them in the wind tunnel. This is something that is you're time limited to, so generally you need to be quite quick and confident in what you're doing to get the part on the car, and if it doesn't fit, having the understanding and the visual ability to see why it's not fitting properly and things like that, because there's a very famous saying that everything fits in CAD, so not always the case. So yeah, as a model maker, that's your prime responsibility, is making parts for a scale model in a wind tunnel. How that's produced is in there's so many different variety of rapid prototyping now, obviously composites, and I think you learn a lot. You need a good eye for detail for something like that, because some components are tiny. You know, you have like a 5mm gurney on a full-size car. You can imagine how small that's going to be on a 60% car.
Yeah.
So I loved it, and you get to see the car develop, and you know, it's forever changing. You could have 50 brake duct options just in one session, you know, and you're trying all these options, and they all look the same, and you're questioning it, and then if your aero is friendly, they'll share the information and discuss everything with you to show you what you've actually achieved or not achieved. I mean, you have good parts, bad parts, you don't really know. And I think that's quite exciting, you know, and especially when you have time constraints in the wind tunnel, they have to share time now within the wind tunnel and CFD. So it's a different balance between different teams. I can't speak for everybody, so I'm not really sure. But it means that, you know, you need to be quick to make the most of the time. That's model making. I think it's quite a good. I think it's quite a good job that people don't know about, because there's so much variety in it. Like I say, less so maybe now, but I still think you get to do a lot of different stuff, you know, because you get to see development stuff that people don't ever really see. You know, there'll be an update on the front wing at the racetrack, but we'd have done it maybe 3 months before and done 20 of them, you know. So yeah, I think it's an interesting career path if people are quite creative. It's definitely very hands-on, but I think you can have a good rapport with designers and aerodynamicists, and yeah, I think with experience you start learning what things do what, and it gives you a good understanding of aerodynamics as well, I think. And then composites, let's say, is almost realizing what you're doing in model making. So as you all know, most of the cars are carbon fiber, and you're working on the big parts. So whatever's come out of the model shop and is then produced full size. As a technician at the racetrack, you're responsible for the fitment of those, repairs if they get damaged, and the aero side of things. So if there's an aero update or flap angles, etc., you're responsible for them on the racetrack. I think predominantly repairs are important. So understanding why you're repairing it, understanding how you're repairing it. Obviously, you always have support of people with experience who have done it before, or the engineers, etc. But I like it, and there's a good adrenaline rush with both jobs, I think. Like, you might not be at the racetrack, but even at the tunnel, you know, you're pushing and you're racing the guy next to you, because there's normally one on one side of the car, you know. I think it's fun. And obviously when you're at the track, with curfews and things like that, you have a time limit. And there's obviously different type of composites technicians as well. There's in-house ones that do predominantly the manufacturing of the parts for the car. So you have trimmers who cut up all the carbon fiber that's been made by the laminators, and they all fit, you know, dowels in and inserts and everything, you know, and you can be responsible for a whole chassis, you know, or suspension in F1, which is also carbon. You know, there's lots of different avenues, and I think that makes the job quite interesting, because you're not ever just doing one component. And then obviously, yeah, the racetrack, it's more repair work, or yeah, as I said, set up for the car.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like such an interesting job, but it's just, I feel like it's also a job that you don't really know about unless you're already within it. You have some family that have, done it, or like the mechanical side, you've been exposed to it. How did this come about for you? How did this end up being your career?
So actually, I studied vehicle design at university at Coventry, and I was fortunate enough that this was kind of a job that was in between automotive design and engineering. So I always said that, it was like not conceptual, and I was the one always realizing the concept to either the engineers' comments or legislations and things like that. So I don't think they actually do that course anymore. I don't know why. I think it just people didn't do it in the end. But I got to do clay modelling and work in a small scale wind tunnel. It was nothing fancy. We were making like little cardboard models to try it in Myra, in Nuneaton and things like that. And I got quite interested in aerodynamics, but I was never that I would say I'm not that intelligent. Like my math skills are very weak, and I can't, unless I can visualize it and see it, I'm useless. So I always thought I wanted to do something with my hands. I was very good at design technology and art and PE at school and things like that. I was the sporty one, and so I did a degree, and it I must admit, I didn't really know about it. I saw the job. I mean, I was applying for all sorts of jobs when I left university, and I applied for it, and it took about 4 months before I heard back. I had the interview. I took my art portfolio, my design drawings, because I was like right before CAD was so massive. I was like using a drawing board and things. So it just shows my age a bit. But before I got my job in motorsport, I did an automotive research job where I researched incentives of the automotive market. And it meant I had like 3 computer screens with various stuff going on at once. And it just made me realize I'm just not someone that can sit in front of a computer. I mean, it's probably more tiring doing that than it is doing some of the physical stuff I do now. So
I know you mentioned before that you just said it took 4 months for the whole process, and you mentioned that it was a really competitive field. We had someone ask about how competitive it really is to get into these jobs, and whether that takes a negative effect on your experience after, or if it has an effect on the whole situation. Do you think it does, or did it have one with you at all?
I think it's tough. It really is tough, and even now I'm looking at applying for jobs, and I think I was saying to Elizabeth the other day that I'm now the other way. I've got the experience, but that then makes people think I'm expensive, and so I'm the opposite. So you have the typical, you don't have enough experience, but how do I gain experience when you're not going to give me any experience? And you go around in circles, right? And I just sent so many applications, and even if I got one that said no, I was like, okay, fine. But I don't know, just don't give up. I think you have to be persistent, and don't worry that maybe they get annoyed with you, but because don't they say that even bad media is good, so I think it is competitive, and the more and more people start realizing that there are jobs available, then for sure it's going to get more competitive.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that opens the jobs up for everybody, whereas before it was quite niche. I can't tell you how on earth I got my job at Red Bull. I think my degree helped. I had a degree in a similar subject. And I think I didn't aim too high. Okay, yes, I started my career in F1, but I started right at the bottom. I started in as a junior, and I think actually doing it a bit longer and done like WEC and seen other series. I mean, even just volunteering to make coffee, you know, it gets your face known. It gets a rapport with the people that you could be possibly working with. I mean, I've got such a great family in both F1 and WEC now. I think that does help me, and reputation helps me, luckily. But yeah, it's hard. I think if your main dream is to go work in F1, you shouldn't give up. But I kind of always say that there is other formulas out there, and I think there's this, I don't want to say it wrong, it's not a misconception that F1 is the pinnacle of motorsport, because it is, but there's other motorsports that we don't unfortunately see or hear about in the same way, and I think they're a good stepping stone to get into Formula One, if that's what you want, to make yourself shine out from the others. Yeah, get as much experience as you can, get a degree in something that you enjoy, not just the degree in what you want to do as a career. I mean, originally I wanted to do product design and be a designer, and I never really planned to go into motorsport, but I loved motorsport, and I kind of fell into it a little bit. But I don't know, I think actually you'd be surprised, just because competition's there in every job. I think we're just a bit more noisy about the fact that in F1 it's more difficult, but I think if you went to work in any automotive sector, it would be quite similar. So
Yeah, I think I'm stealing one of Elizabeth's questions here. But so Sam, you mentioned before how there's so many categories, obviously, in motorsport. So if you could pick just one job in one category right now, you could pick it, and that would be your job for now. Do you have an idea? Do you have like?
I don't know. I think I'd like to go, and I've been quite fortunate enough to kind of achieve what I wanted to achieve already. But if I was going to go and all out and do something really random, I'd go and like do, I don't know, the Extreme E or Dakar or something like that, something like really out there that would probably, I mean, the mechanics and that in those sort of jobs, it must be crazy, you know, because you're out in the middle of the desert or covered in mud, and you know, and they're not small cars, you know. I'm not sure. I think I don't even know if, yeah, maybe even like aerospace or something like that. You know, be part of building a shuttle that goes to, I don't know, to Mars next. I think it's difficult because I don't want to say I don't ever want to work in motorsport again, and I don't ever want to say I don't want to work in aerospace or something like that, you know. But I think
both.
I think, I mean, I'd go back to F1, I'd go and do WEC, stuff that I haven't done. I really want to tick off working the Daytona 24. But, you know, it might be one of those races that I will never do. I'd like to work the Indy 500, but again, it might be one of those races I'll never do. I've watched the Daytona 500 and I've watched the Indy 500 as a spectator, so I kind of ticked them off. It's an interesting question because kind of, I don't know, but I think, yeah, I don't know, that's kind of stumped me, that one.
Yeah, sorry, don't worry.
I kind of, yeah, I'm fortunate enough to, if I wasn't, let's say if I couldn't go back to do F1 or WEC or something like that, and there was like an opportunity to go, yeah, maybe something MotoGP or, yeah, like I say, Dakar, I think would be quite interesting to go and see how that's all done. I don't know.
Is there any difference with the roles you've had between series? Sorry, Liz.
I think over the years it's changed anyway. I think the difference between something like endurance racing in F1 is endurance racing, that part that you repair has to withstand a lot longer time. So the 24 hours of Le Mans, for example. So you have to be confident that whatever you do could withstand that amount of time. Whereas I guess I still think the same principle should be done for F1, you know, because in theory you could be doing 3 races back to back. So whatever you do as a repair should be structurally sound, it should be safe. But it's the turnaround of aero development and parts on F1 is probably slightly higher than it is in WEC, where a lot of cars are homologated and fixed for up to 5 years. But then I think you probably use the parts for longer in WEC. You don't have the budgets the same in F1, so if you break a part, you're probably more likely to have to repair it. But okay, pit stops are very different between the series. But if you were doing composites, I think, yeah, you can carry it over very easily. I think it's a very good, like a mechanic. I would say maybe it's less of a challenge in F1, let's say. I don't want to say it quite like that, but I think the engineers do help you a bit more in F1 than you would in WEC, because I don't know if there's less engineers, but I think you're sort of like if something happens during the race, you kind of have to already, you know, you're fixing it as you're going, and you can't wait for an engineer to make a decision. You have to get on with it a bit more. So maybe the responsibility is a little higher in terms of that. It feels like I'm putting myself in a hole and saying, oh, it's rubbish or something like that. But no, I think they have pluses and minuses for both series. Yeah, but that's the beauty. Well, that's why they're different, right?
Yeah, I mean, you've had the pleasure of working across a couple of series. Between work and F1 and maybe anything else that you've done, have you found the trackside experience any different? Say the competitiveness or the friendships you make, or just working within the team?
They both have. I don't know. I'm lucky to have really good friends in both WEC and F1. And they are like extended family. Like, you know, if I go quiet for any amount of time, someone from one team will check up on me, you know, and I think that's fantastic. There's more teams in WEC, you know, the grid is a lot bigger, and I think, and what you find is that like if one team goes under, that team will then dissipate into other teams. So you end up knowing someone in every team, and if something goes wrong, you can kind of rely on them for help. And I think you can in F1 actually in the same way. I've never had a problem asking people for, you know, if we're run out of some glue or something like that. Both pit lanes you can go and ask a neighbour. There is competitive. I think in the garage it can be quite competitive between drivers, as in the teams that run the cars. I think you can't get away with that, or can't get around that, let's say. I think it is. I mean, everyone's competitive, but it's always a family. You know, when the race starts, I guess it's very different. You know, you sort of turn on this different mindset that, right, we've got to do what we need to do to get this race and get us to the end of the race. The pit stop needs to be the best. You are having a competition between everybody else. But I think on the build up and the lead to the race and qualifying, I think everyone's on the same level. And I don't think the competitiveness is there. I'm sure some people will say it's different, but I've never had that experience where I've never felt welcome anywhere. Like when last year when Max won the title, I went to the podium because I started my career at F1 in Red Bull, and I will always have a tie there. But I also know people at Mercedes, so I was there to say sorry to them as well. And I don't think, I'm sure for sure, when I was at Red Bull and we were winning titles, we were very competitive, but I don't think you ever lose the sympathy of when something goes wrong for another team, let's say.
Okay, now we're talking about the different series. This one's a little bit of a fun question. Who's the nicest driver you've met?
Oh, that's easy. That's easy. For me, it will always be Sebastian Vettel, always. Because
I would break my hoodie here, but it's out of reach. But yes, I like that answer.
There's many nice drivers there, but I was with him when I started Red Bull in 2008, so I saw him when he joined. And then even last year, he would say hello to me when I bumped into him in an airport. He's a fantastic guy, and people think he's lost his spark, but I think that's more that he's had a family, and just as you get a bit older, your priorities change. And he was always very down to earth when he was at Red Bull, and he was always one of us. And he also realized that without his team, he wouldn't have been world champion. He's an amazing driver, but you can't win anything without a team behind you. And I think he was always very good at that. And there's times where he'd stay behind and help pack the garage up and things like that. And at the time, I think that was quite unusual. So yeah, he is my favorite. I've got loads of guys that I would say are great. So for me, it's a big plus if they offer to make me a cup of tea or a cup of coffee in the morning. So or remember your name. There's a few drivers that wouldn't even know who you are, and I think it's important that they do.
Yeah. Nice. Well, I don't want to get you in trouble with this next question, but have you taken any souvenirs away from the pack, wherever it may be?
I've had leaving presents.
That's a better way of wording it.
I would say no. I don't think I have really, because no, I've got some. I'm just looking. So actually, it's a bit of a sad topic. I actually helped make one of Dietrich's birthday presents. I mean, go and Google it. It was a ball that we made, I think, for his 60th birthday. I could be wrong. I think it was his 60th, and it was a ball made out of loads of car body parts, and I helped. I was lucky to be part of that project, and they gave me a picture and a photo, a big photo of what we'd done, and then leaving presents, parts of the cars. But I used to make the leaving presents at Red Bull. It's something I used to like doing. I did have a load of gear ratios at one point, but I donated that to the ball for Dietrich, because they at one point they just threw them away. But I never took them out. They were always at work with a view that I might make a lamp or something out of it, But no, I think I have. I've got a wheel, but I paid for that. They auctioned off some of the old wheels at Toyota. So I have an old wheel. It was you pay some money and it went to charity. But no.
Yeah, I think wheels are fairly easy to get a hold of. You can get them if you beg the Formula E stuff hard enough. I hear that you can get a hold of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if it's damaged and they have to throw them out anyway.
Oh, yeah, when they're damaged, it's slightly different. These were just that they'd gone from the LMP1 to the LMDH, so they were the old style, and they just gave everyone the opportunity if they wanted one. I mean, it's in the garage somewhere. With the view that maybe one day it'd be a coffee table, one of those. But no, I haven't. I've got all my passes. My thing is to always get my pass signed by the drivers I work with. That's always something I've done, and I'm not very good. Yeah, even like stuff like asking for autographs, I'm rubbish at doing that. I always go to the communications person, like, please, just ask them. So disappointing. I don't have any souvenirs.
Still time. Okay, but we actually had a lot of people ask just about your general day-to-day. So like, what would be a day-to-day in your roles? They want what would be the starting time, what would be the hours, and yeah, what would you do?
Well, so that can be model making. It can be shifts. It really depends on the team. It can be a 9 to 5 if you're at the factory as a model maker, but generally the wind tunnel is 24/7, but it's not, because obviously the restrictions. But they'll have a night shift to prepare stuff overnight, or if they need to run it overnight, you can do. The hours are restricted, but to the amount of hours in a set period. So you could do 36 hours running and then have the rest of the time off, let's say. But not as a person. That's the wind tunnel hours. Yeah, so as a composites technician at the factory, 9 to 5, but it's not. It's normally like starting at 8 or starting at 7. Each team has a different lunch hour, different amount of time you have at lunch, whether you have a breakfast time or a tea time, so it can vary what time. And for sure, if it's a lead up to a race, you work all the hours you need to work and to get something done. So and in your contract, it will be, you will work above and beyond the hours stated in your contract because of the nature of the job, let's say. So it can be fairly steady at the factory until, the week before the race, or depending when the freight's going, if it's air freight or sea freight, then you can be pushed a little bit to get everything done in time, and you will work overtime for that. And generally you don't get paid for overtime in motorsport because it's part of the job, to get the car ready. So it's like that. And at the track, now F1 is very different. They've changed, have a 9-hour curfew, and I think that even starts earlier Friday now. I can't remember. WC, you don't have a curfew, so you can work until you drop, let's say. So if we go for like a Le Mans week, which is 24-hour, you'll work fairly steady on the build up, but then you'll also have a night test session, which will finish in the early hours of the night, and you would have still been at work at possibly a bit later, at like 9 o'clock in the morning instead. Come race day, you're in at 7 a.m. in the morning, and you don't leave the racetrack until 7 p.m. in the evening the Sunday. So you start Saturday morning at 7 and finish Sunday night. That's, an extreme. But there is no real hours. The racetrack varies. It varies what time the race will be. Singapore's a night race, so you're working like a night shift, but you're not, because you're on European time, let's say. But you always get a schedule. You always know what hours, and you always go with everybody. There's teams that like to be there right, waiting for the gate to open. And I think that's quite nice in F1, is that you have that curfew. So you do always have that downtime. But it's long hours, but I think it's give and take. I think you get some, like, you put in the hours, but you also get the time off. So I think, I would say it's that easy at the track in terms of hours.
What's the time off actually like? Because obviously there's, at least in F1, there's that, summer break and the winter break, but the winter break is still development time. Like, do you actually get holidays, or is it just like a big pretend thing?
So as a race team, you won't be, last year to this year, obviously in F1 was very different because there was a whole brand new car. So we didn't have, well, obviously I left at the end of the year, but I would have been expected in January. So you would have had 2 weeks off and then back in, unfortunately. And then I don't know what time they would have had off. Normally, as soon as you finished normally like in between races, you're not expected to go to the track. Especially with flyaways, once the car's gone, the car's gone. You know, once the car's back in the factory, you will generally be there to unload everything, check everything. If stuff's broken, you're normally lucky enough to have a composites department to send, or gearbox department or whatever to send it to. So then they'll be busy, but you probably have the downtime in between races. Some of the teams now the guys don't do a full season. They'll do maybe 19 races and then they'll get paid extra to do more as an incentive, but obviously otherwise they'll go to the factory and work in the factory. I mean, it's getting better, you know. I think always a shutdown is 2 weeks. I think it's 2 weeks but 3 weekends, is it? I can't remember. I think so. But like if you're in the factory and maintenance needs to be done, there's like leeway to do some maintenance. I mean, that's like building maintenance, so painting stuff and things like that. So you can sometimes get your time back. That depends on the teams and the circumstances. And you have the opportunity to stay out after some races as well. So some teams will allow you to stay on. So I stayed in Langkawi for a week in between Malaysia and Singapore or something like that in 2016. So there's that as well that you know is quite a good incentive.
What's your first thing as soon as you're home, you've got the time off? What's the first thing you're doing?
Sitting down on the couch and watching some English TV.
That's oh, all right.
Yeah.
It sounds like a great time to me. So a lot about racing roles is obviously when we want to bring light to all these different jobs. We actually had a teacher come in and ask us the question of how do you think model making and composites technician, the roles you've had, could be brought to kids' attentions in school, in primary school, in high school, whether that be through subjects or some other organizations or anything like that, just because there are certain roles which people will never know about until maybe it might be too late. We don't want to say too late because you can always do it, but once they've gained another interest. Maybe.
I think like a lot of arts and crafts are really good for model making. Like just even trying to make a model of a car or a model of anything. I mean, I think one of the biggest topics that influenced me was design technology at school, and I was quite lucky that we had various machines and tools that we could use, and whether that was I made some salad tongs back in the day out of forming plastic, you know, ABS plastic. I mean, I don't even know where they are now. I meant like a kitchen tool which was using like a vacuum form with plastic, and I was quite lucky. But even like making stuff out of cardboard, and it can be buildings, it can be, and I think it's just using your hands. So my predominant expertise is I can see out of the box quite well. So if someone says, oh, I want to do this, I can kind of visualize it quite well. And I think topics like art and design technology, and actually PE really helped me because I studied biomechanics and things like that, and how the swimmers flow through water, and you know, obviously there's a knock-on effect with aerodynamics. But I think the biggest thing is working with your hands. So in schools, you know, you used to make those funny little games where you fold bits of, not origami, but you know, even origami is, you know, there's a skill in stuff like that, right? And in the schools, I think just getting kids to say cut the parts out, glue them together, put them together, make working models, and learning about composites, so all the different materials. I did a lot of material theory work when I was at school, making stuff. It was learning, like, even if I'm making a model of this, what materials could I use, and learning how to, the tools, what tools, and having various tools on site that maybe we weren't allowed to use unsupervised, but we could physically hold them and see what they were like. But yeah, being creative, I think it's a good way to keep attention. I mean, my attention span's rubbish, so when I could get my hands on something, you know, I was always doodling and, you know, stuff like that. So, and I think that helped me, you know. Design technology was massive. I don't know how big it is in schools now, but the theory is always quite boring, and actually getting to do it. So if you're taught about carbon fiber, you can get like make at home kits. There's companies that do, like, you know, in your garage kits where you just get some resin and put it in some carbon cloth. I mean, that's super simple. And you don't need an autoclave or anything like that. You can get resins that go off overnight, and just getting their hands dirty in that respect, teaching the theory side, and then allowing them to go and give it a go, even though it's messy. But I think in terms of getting it more known, I think it is becoming more known, especially like with you guys and stuff like that, and more people are realizing it's not this elite industry, and people are just starting to see it more. And I went and gave talks to my school, and after I'd left, to sort of say, well, this is what I've done, and to the sixth form there, you know, just before they were choosing their A levels and things like that. Yeah, I think it could be accessible. Like you say, it's just knowing about it and knowing what you can do. But yeah, I just used to like making stuff. Lego's great too. So make sure they get loads of Lego at the school.
Yes. I wish mine were. Just going on that, are there any jobs or work experience internships you did that you really felt helped with what you're doing now?
It wasn't really a big thing for me. I got rejected a lot from internships and, you know, work experience and stuff like that, because I was too experienced. Or I did work experience with Aston Martin in their sales room, and just I didn't get paid for it. I just went and did it. I think just having even just any job. I think I worked in a coffee shop for a year, and you just get used to dealing with people. And I think that's a huge part of growing up, is learning how to deal with everybody, because especially in motorsport, you're not on your own, and you need to, even if you don't like them, work with them. And just working in bars and pubs and things like that, I think you get to deal with that, which gives you quite a good base for any job.
If you were to sell this job to someone, what would you tell someone, and what is something you think that they need to know before coming in?
That you're gonna break lots of nails, need lots of plasters. It's quite physical. I'm not the fittest. I was pretty fit before this year, but then I got an injury, and you know, there's quite a lot of manual labour, lifting and things like that. And I think the hours we work, it's good to be fit and have a certain level of fitness, just to be able to sustain the hours we do. What else? I think, yeah, you're going to get dirty, messy. I think you just need to, yeah. I don't think you don't need to. You don't even need to be intelligent. I think you just need to have an understanding. I don't know. That's a difficult question. I'm not really. How would I sell it? Yeah, I enjoy it. It's great fun. I like getting messy. It's like being a kid sometimes, getting glue everywhere like you did when you were like making that paper mache balloon thing or whatever you were doing. And I think you need a creative mind. I think, the engineer can have an understanding of what they would like, but I think the next step, which would be me, you need to be able to visualize that a bit more. In terms of having a specific degree, I think having an understanding of aerodynamics is helpful, I think, and design, but like a creative degree or something, or college or work experience is very helpful, especially because you do use your hands. I mean, I don't touch a computer at all, really. Maybe to get the CAD model up to see how an assembly fits together or something like that. I think if you're a very creative person and you like arts, things like that, I just think it's a perfect job, let's say.
All right. I think we've got one more real main question, unless Christian has some other. What other roles within the team do you interact with most?
So, me, personally, I've always had a very good rapport with the aerodynamicists and engineers. That's a personal thing, I think, because I've always been interested in aerodynamics. So I'm always like, oh, why have we done that? Or why are we doing this, Obviously, I work alongside the mechanics, and the chief mechanic would normally be my boss, let's say, at the racetrack. So he'd be the one in charge of me. But you'd obviously work very closely with the mechanics because they'll be waiting on parts that you're creating, and you'd be waiting on them to give you some parts. I think and then the parts specialist and the parts coordinator, and I think you end up having a bit of a relationship with everybody. Designers, when you're back at the factory, maybe something didn't fit correctly when you're at the track, that you have some feedback or a different idea on. Same with but there's so many different types of engineers as well, I think you end up because it looks like there's a lot of people, right, but there isn't, and I think you end up bouncing off each other with everything. If you're with the truckies, always have a good relationship with them, because you end up helping them out and they end up helping you out. The tire guys, I think, you're sharing space with other areas. Like even when I was at Alfa Romeo, the ERS guy and the engine guys would be sharing some space with everybody. So you sort of get a relationship with them. And I think you end up dealing with everybody in some way or form. But like directly, the mechanics, I would say, as a same level, no. You work with them because they're kind of doing the same as what you're doing.
Well, you mentioned that you work with designers, if parts didn't fit or so on. Have there ever been times where you've had to either persuade them that, well, you've been right, they've say been wrong, or where you've had to persuade them that yes, it does fit, or fix something, or just try and really stick to your idea over theirs, or something?
I mean, there's quite a few times. I used to do a lot of the aero test rates for Red Bull many, many, many years ago. I had quite a good responsibility of those, and there'd be some times that they'd create something and you'd be like, it's not even possible, I can't do this. I can do it like this time around, but then please can we make a better idea? And recently, with like homologating the car and things like that, when we've had to sort of ad hoc things, not just during homologation, but at the track, something's not working quite right, that you have to kind of, they have to trust you. There has to be trust. It's a big thing between what I do and the designer and the engineer. They have to trust me that my experience is only there to help them. And for sure, sometimes I get tunnel vision, let's say, and think, oh, you can only do it this way, and they'll say, oh no, but why don't you try it like this? And I think it can be vice versa, especially when a lot of designers these days don't always get to go to the track, and don't have that experience. I think it's, as a designer, a great thing is to go and spend some time in the model shop or the composites department to actually see what your parts are doing, because for sure the feedback, we can give so much feedback, but whether it gets to the designer or not is not always the case. But I think eventually, with experience, you get that trust, you earn that trust from a designer to be able to chat with them on a level that can make them understand why you're suggesting something different.
Okay, so I think we're at the end of the questions, but